kind of gone full circle from those Ottolenghi days where I had full creative control. Yotam used to come through the kitchen and he'd say, what's on the menu today, chef? And I would show him, and he would literally take things off the plate and say, you know what, you don't need these. Let's showcase what you're trying to showcase here, the vegetable or the protein.
Winter can be a tricky time in restaurants, especially in the cooler southeastern corners of the country. We're talking today to Brad Cunningham, who's recently taken on the head chef position at Waygood in Richmond in Melbourne. He's got some smart ideas for winter trading. Brad, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Really good to have you on the show. Tell us a little bit about Waygood and what attracted you to working there.
Yeah, so Waygood is a small wine bar on Swan Street, Richmond. I suppose I was looking for a job where I could showcase some of my creativity, somewhere where the menu is a little bit more fluid. From my experience coming the last 10 years have been with kind of large volume. I really wanted to try and scale it down and really trying to get back to, what's important on the plate and what's seasonal, and really try and tap into that local space. What are the locals wanting to eat? Here's a place where, they might frequent once or twice a fortnight. What can we give them? How can we keep it fun, a little bit edgy, but really just get back to honest, flavoursome, colourful food that's just going to obviously add to their experience of living local.
So what are you specifically doing? What kind of what are you offering the neighbourhood?
Yeah, well, I suppose when I started, having big chats with Martin Perk, the owner, we're really trying to offer something that's a little bit different to our competitors. There's a lot of wine bars, there's a lot of competition on that strip. So what I kind of started to tap into was kind of my experience with, European and Middle Eastern cuisine. So trying to just offer something that was a little bit more approachable, not so refined, and all about the flavour, tasty food. That's a lot of vegetables as well. Like trying to, our demographic. We're trying to, we see what people are ordering. So I'm trying to have about 2/3 of the menu that is vegetarian or vegan, and then obviously still having some steak and fish and some staples as well.
Yeah, right. That's really interesting. Are you noticing that people are watching what they spend, perhaps dining out less frequently, or not ordering that second bottle of wine when they do come out?
Yeah, I think the spend for food has kind of taken a bit of a hit. I think people are sitting on drinks a little bit longer than they normally would, and a lot of wines by the glass. There's not so many bottles sold these days, unfortunately. So, there was a table of 3 the other night. I think they ordered, about $50 worth of food between 3 of them. I mean, obviously they're just out for a bit of a catch up, a bit of a hang. Maybe people are eating less these days too, which is obviously not good when you're in the food business, but just trying to have somewhere, a local space where it's okay to do that, I suppose.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you want to provide that flexible space for people to have those hangs. If they did feel like having a couple of nibbles, why shouldn't they? But it's really, really tricky to strike that right balance, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for, leaning into winter and it's getting colder and you can't just hang at the house all the time. We've done a lot of Netflix and chill. Now it's time to kind of come out, and we've been out for a couple of years since we won't mention what we've gone through, but obviously with the COVID era, we're way more social than we were. We've been connected through social media, and now we're coming out and we're having a lot of catch ups. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see the shift and people not spending as much as they would. And I think from a small restaurant point of view, you need to be able to have value for money, and I think that's what's going to get us through these colder months is keeping the restaurant full by offering value for money. Our food costs might take a little bit of a hit. We might be running 30 to 33%. We would normally, summertime where it's a bit more fluid, we might be, running about 28 to 30%. So I think we're just going to have to wear that to kind of survive through these colder months, especially with so much competition.
And one thing that I think about a lot, and maybe it's because I love desserts, is the place of desserts. And I feel like so many people just don't order dessert. They think whether they, feel like they're too full or they shouldn't eat it. But I feel really sorry for pastry chefs and those head chefs that put a lot of thought into that end of the menu. What's your experience in how people are approaching the sweet end of the menu at the moment?
Yeah, I suppose that's quite an interesting question. There's a lot of people that follow these cult things like Loon, and they get their sweet fix other ways. And chefs have always had this pressure, you got to have a couple of desserts. And they've never really, a lot of chefs that I know in my experience throughout my career have kind of, it was always a second thought, and it was always something you could quickly just whip up. But I think, the technical side of it, and it's very rewarding to put together a well-constructed dish. And, I was looking at some sales of what we were doing the last week, and, our baked cheesecake was, one of the biggest sellers. So I think people are coming in, and if you've got a good waiter and you're offering good table service, you're definitely going to get a dessert out of them. And there were some people that were coming in, they had 9 o'clock bookings. They came in for, a wine and dessert. So, having that flexibility to be that place as well, I think is important.
Yeah, interesting. And what about margins on desserts? Is that somewhere that you can pick up some of that food cost?
Yeah, I think, look, everything's gone up in price, dairy especially. So I think there's some margin of error, but I think you still need to come in, I've seen desserts up in the 20s now. It's crazy. So, having something that's still around that $12 to $14 mark, I think, whatever the margins, I think it's just adding to that spend per person. And I think that's what we need to kind of tap into a little bit more. People that are coming in just for dessert, well, you just have to wear that if it's a 35% food cost or whatever it's going to be. But offering that dessert and having that, $50 spend per person on food, that's obviously the ultimate goal, I suppose.
Brad, what about cheese? Because when I go to restaurants, even though I'm a massive cheese freak, I don't usually order it because I guess I'm usually reviewing and I feel like there's not much to say about a cheese platter. Sorry if that's offending people. But is that somewhere, how do you feel people are approaching cheese?
Look, I like cheese as much as the next person, but I think it's tokenistic that we have a cheese on our menu, and I think it's great to showcase small producers. I'm not a big fan of having international cheese on my menus. I'd rather have kind of, Gippsland or, South Australian or something that's fairly local to Melbourne to kind of showcase. So, I mean, cheese is cheese. I love it when I go out, but as a chef, I think, having it portioned or portioning it to order or whatever you're doing, putting it on a plate, keeping it simple, the right temperature, all those little things. And there's not much else you can really do with it. The margins are pretty slim because obviously it's way more expensive than it was 3 or 4 years ago. So having your standard soft, hard, and blue, or some people get a bit crazy and do all sorts of fun things. I'm a big fan of raclette, but I understand that it does smell out the restaurant, and people walk in and go, if they do not understand that smell, they're like, it's a bit putrefied. It's a bit on the nose for them. But cheese is important. But I don't think, looking at sales last week, it was one of the lowest selling things. So maybe it's a seasonal thing, or maybe it's just people are not being so, maybe a bit more conscious on health, or maybe people are just buying good cheese and having it at home. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I mean, it probably is one of those things that people feel like they can create for themselves at home. Maybe they want to go to a restaurant for things that they can't do, in the lounge room. It's a really interesting one. I mean, I think about the cheese trolley at Vue du Monde, and obviously that's like next level and, a completely different experience. But when you see cheese presented as theatre and art and, really honouring the craft of those producers, then I will totally go to town. But then I guess they're charging for it, and there's also a lot of effort that's gone into the accompaniments that go with the different cheeses. So it's a whole... I don't know. I just think maybe is that what you need to do? You need to really turn it into this massive cheese experience. You need to not just have raclette, but have raclette night, so that people understand that they're coming for that, and that it's a good smell, not a freaky smell.
That's right. I did some work in catering a few years back, and we'd set up these massive cheese tables and props and all sorts of antique wine cheese casings, and it was very very bespoke. But at the end of the night, when you're packing it away and there's cheese that's been out at temperature for 4 to 5 hours, that's when it's really, really good. And as chefs, that was one of the greatest privileges. Was the cheese table was touched, but it wasn't demolished, so you'd get to enjoy some crackers and cheese and wine at the end of a massive event. So that was a lot of fun.
That's great. That's really good. But then I suppose, sorry to bring it down, but I also think about the food waste with those big grazing tables.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'd package it up and we'd give it back to, what we could salvage back to them for, their staff, meals the next day or whatever. But yeah, there is a lot of wastage, especially with those big events. It's ridiculous. And people that have these huge parties in their homes, and they're catering for 100 people, but there's only 50 people that show up. And the food waste, it's so hard to see some of the food have to go into the bin. So yeah, there's so much more we can do in that space and not be so extravagant with portion sizes, I think.
That's such a tricky one, Brad, because you've got that, you always want to create that sense of abundance and generosity. But how do you do that and still, and reduce food waste?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of, charities, homeless kind of organisations that are set up, non-for-profits that are getting involved. But there was so much kind of tape to cut through, like, food safety, things that were, it seemed too hard. It was deemed impossible to actually donate food after it had been out after 4 hours and things like that. So there was one organisation, one events organisation that would invite people to their venues late at night after everyone had gone home to kind of, feast on the food that was left over. But obviously bringing in, a lot of people that are doing it rough was obviously not seen as a good look too as well. So it's a real finite kind of situation where you've got, polar opposites, people that are almost in famine, and then you've got people that have just got way too much.
I would love to talk a bit more about your career because it does seem really interesting. You've worked, as you mentioned, for caterers, and you also worked for a restaurant group, Riverland Group. How have you sort of approached moving on to those next opportunities? Is it about, learning? Is it about growing? Is it about stretching yourself? What leads you from place to place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I suppose my career, I've always seen it as, okay, what can I do next, or what haven't I done? Let's fill in those gaps. I started off with a very fine dining background, and then obviously, worked my way around New Zealand, and then kind of went to London, as we all did, in the mid-20s, when I was in my mid-20s, 2.5 years over there. Obviously looking at, I went there with a fine dining mindset. I got a job with Gordon Ramsay, owned Marcus Waring's at the Berkeley back then, 2 Michelin stars. So I started there, and that was my journey. That was what I was meant to do. So I went there. I think I lasted about 8 weeks, and then I thought, nah, there's got to be more to life than working these 18-hour days. So I went searching for a totally different job. I had no interest in catering. Had I even thought of it? Cafes, nah. Obviously, London's not very well known for those. But I ended up getting an interview with Ottolenghi, and he had just released his first cookbook. He was selling his cookbooks in this beautiful glassed restaurant deli that showcased, big meringues and big desserts. And, I was always thinking, in Australia, you'd have to have these all, chilled, or you'd all have to have, food safety around them. But everything was just out. It's probably changed now. There's probably glass walls up or something to kind of prevent germs. But I had an interview with him, and I really liked what he was doing. It was really, Tupper style, lots of colours and flavours, and so I got stuck in there. But then to just kind of answer your question, when I got back from London, I went to Sydney, and I did the cafe experience for 18 months, getting up at 5:30 in the morning, and then I still had itchy feet, so I was like, I'm going to go to Paris for a year. Got a visa, went there, worked at a kind of fusion restaurant, Japanese and French fusion. And then when I landed in Melbourne, I was like, well, what should I do? I got into catering for 5 years, and that was a really good, massive eye opener. I really learned to work on those volumes. And then I had this goal, when I'm when I'm 40, I want to be an executive chef. So I really, was pushing for that. I got a job at Riverland Group, and oversaw 6 restaurants, and that was obviously huge. A lot of computer work, a lot of compliance, budgeting, recruitment. There was seasonal menu changes, and a lot of training and development with chefs. So I suppose coming to a conclusion about my career, it was the end of 2022, and I was thinking, what am I going to do? I was giving so much support and dedication to others. I really felt it was time to get something back for myself. So I stepped away from it all, the Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 job. And now I'm working 5 nights at a small wine bar in Richmond. So it's a real turn of events. I met my goal, obviously, and thought I need to get back and do what I'm best at, and kind of gone full circle from those Ottolenghi days where I had full creative control. Yotam used to come through the kitchen, and he'd say, what's on the menu today, chef? And I would show him, and he would literally take things off the plate and say, you know what, you don't need these. Let's showcase what you're trying to showcase here, the vegetable or the protein. You don't need all these fancy garnishes. He was really the artist about simplicity, and that's one of the biggest lessons. And I didn't learn it until, later on in my career, that I look back and I think, gosh, he's really shaped simplistic vision that I have now for food, and really trying to use good technique. So yeah.
It's so interesting. I think, I guess I can look at you working at at Marcus Waring, doing those 18-hour days. You would have gone there thinking that was the next step for you. You were going to, it was really going to sweep you up and push you along. But no, you guess you had the insight and I guess the courage to say no, that actually, wrong idea. And then again, I guess people would look at that role as executive chef across the Riverland Group and think, that's a really high level position, and to move to Waygood would be a step down, really. But for you to, I guess, have the courage and insight to know that you're doing the right things for yourself, to make those moves that are perhaps counterintuitive for someone who's building a career in the industry, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I felt like I had to make kind of a step down to be able to step up again. I'm very unknown, but I feel like I owe it to myself and my career to really kind of try and see how far I can push, my style of cuisine, which, definitely not fine dining, just good food, honest food done well. And, yeah, that's it.
And, Ottolenghi's has been hugely influential, I would say in home kitchens, perhaps more than in restaurants, but, obviously he's been influential for you as a chef. Why is that, do you reckon? Because, I saw him live recently. I'm a fan. I've got a few of his books. I think he's great. Like, he's so articulate and, really, really smart, like really interesting thinker about food. But at the same time, I sort of think, like, what is it? Like, don't we have our own, like, Middle Eastern food heroes in Australia? Like, what is it about Ottolenghi that's swept up so many people?
Yeah, it's more than Middle Eastern cuisine, though, Dani. It's like it's vegetarianism. His first book was obviously a mixture, and there was a lot of meat items in there. But Plenty and Plenty More, the two books that followed, it was all vegetarian cooking. He's 2 decades writing for The Guardian in London on the vegetarian column. That was his bread and butter. And then I think the key to him and why he's been so successful is his ability to be collaborative with other chefs he employs, and really try and move in different spaces within different cuisines. Sami Tamimi was obviously a huge driver of Ottolenghi in the early days, and has gone on to be a great author on his own, but they collaborated on a book, Jerusalem, which is obviously Ottolenghi is half kind of Israeli and half Italian, and then to go on and collaborate with the likes of Scully and Exeter, Belfrish, like he's gone down that Malaysian, gone to the Mexican side, and to set up his own test kitchen is just genius, and I think his books got a lot of traction. I never knew how big he was until you're looking at design, decor, kind of home and garden style books, and you'd see Ottolenghi books on the dining room or on the coffee tables and up in the shelves, and it became kind of a buzzword, I suppose. But I think the beauty of Ottolenghi is really showcasing those vegetables, those proteins, making them stand out, combining interesting flavors and not being scared to, cross that fusion space where, a lot of people find that confusing when they do it at home. So it's been able to give people the confidence to mix this with that, and kind of like Bibles, I suppose, to some households.
Yeah, wow, that's so well said, and you've totally sold me now. I get it. It's true. It's that vegetable thing, and I have definitely appreciated the way that he's, given platforms to people that he's worked with, and I'd add Helen Go to that list that you mentioned, where it's just he's not afraid to share the limelight.
Yeah, desserts has always been, obviously he's a sweet tooth. He studied at Le Cordon Bleu, but he's never really been a chef in the essence of wearing a jacket and being in the kitchen. He's always a collaborator. He always is attracted to someone that's making flavour bombs, and he'll go there and he'll tap into that. And I think, opening yourself up to collaborating with other chefs, and a lot of chefs are very maybe control freaks, or maybe just hey, this is how I do it, this is my kitchen. But he's like, this is our kitchen. It's a different mindset when you step inside one of his kitchens.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Have you been able to bring any of that culture back to the kitchens you've worked in Australia? Yeah,
I think so. I obviously working for Food and Desire for 5 years, there was a lot, we had multiple head chefs and an exec chef, and we were all very, collaborative with our ideas and making sure we gave a fair representation of the brand that we were trying to cook for. And then obviously at the Riverland Group, giving that autonomy to other chefs and empowering them to, have a dish, bring it to the tasting. Let's see what you've got. I'm going to give you some feedback. I'm going to try and make it better. We'll find a better product. Let's talk to suppliers. So really try and open up that that style that I was attracted to when I worked in London, back to Melbourne to some extent. Yeah, for sure.
That's really good. Well, so Brad, how are you feeling about things at the moment?
Look, we're about to launch neighbourhood nights, which I'm really excited about, and really going to tap into that vegetarian space. I think it's meatless Mondays, whatever we're going to do. Tuesday nights, set menu, vegetarian, very affordable, $39, that kind of thing. Look, how am I feeling about things? I'm just feeling it out. I don't know where I'm going to go next, but I'm definitely going to try and make this business as successful as I can. And if chefs come along and want to do collaborations, or whether chefs want to come in and take over the kitchen and do those kind of things, we're definitely open for all that.
So cool. That's so generous. Great. Well, yeah, please let me know if you have any cool collabs happening. And yeah, that vegetarian banquets for $39 with those Ottolenghi vibes sounds really exciting. So a great offering for the neighbourhood and probably beyond. Brad, such a great chat. Really appreciate all your insights and, the great breadth that you're able to offer to the audience because of all the different things you've done in your career. Really wish you all the best with with winter at Waygood.
Yeah, it should be way good, Dani, and I hope to see you there. And I'll definitely send you some some beautiful cauliflower and some amazing falafel. Actually, the first time I cooked something for Yotam was falafel, and he's like, "Wow, you've got a." I hate to say it, but you got a set of balls, like
yeah.
I think I did it with like grilled halloumi or something. I look back and go, "Oh my god, that's just so it's too much." But yeah, so we'll definitely bring out some old classics, but obviously with good technique and a bit more Melbourneized, I suppose. We love to do that in Melbourne. We just make it our own. So yeah, look forward to it.
Love it. All right, thanks so much for your time, Brad.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This